All right, why don't we go ahead and just jump into it? It's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Here's what worked and what didn't with the OnePlus 9 Pro. Quick disclaimers, a portion of this video is sponsored by Best Buy, where you can get the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro quite easily at your local store. Also, I do have the OnePlus 9 right over here, and I will talk about that a little bit later, especially in comparison to the Pro model. But we do have to start with one of the undeniable details. OnePlus rarely holds back on the performance aspects, and that continues in the 9 series. The Snapdragon 888 is at the helm, backed by up to 256GB of storage and up to 12GB of RAM in both editions. It takes a lot to make this phone sweat, and I've tried, since one of the big draws of the OnePlus 9 Pro for me has been its gaming capabilities. After all, this is one of the only phones that Riot Games currently supports for the full 120 frames per second gameplay in League of Legends Wild Rift. Gaming on the OnePlus phones is still one of the best parts of the experience, as the gaming tools are useful for extra performance gains and for things like holding distractions back. But if you do need to open up a different application, you could do so with a floating app layer. For gaming or otherwise, the 120Hz refresh rate screen is shared between the two phones, even if the actual panels are a little bit different. The OLED screen of the OnePlus 9 Pro is a Quad HD panel, while the regular OnePlus 9 has a Full HD Plus AMOLED screen. But in both cases, the screens are top performers that retain many of Oxygen OS's nice display features, like reading modes and the more recent always-on display customizations, which of course we're going to get to later. The other reason why the OnePlus 9 Pro has been easy to come back to is its charging speed. While both phones have similar 4500 mAh battery units and can take 65-watt fast wire charging, it's the fast 50-watt wireless charging of the OnePlus 9 Pro that has very much spoiled me. I mean, in general, it's easy to just put any phone down on a wireless charger and let it top up while you're doing other stuff, but now the wireless charger comes with the same assurance that you feel after 10 minutes of plugging it in with a wire. If wireless charging is meant to be a key feature of flagship smartphones, this is the way you make it so. Let's talk about some good stuff with the cameras. The OnePlus 9 Pro, with this Hasselblad logo prominently displayed, marks the company's furthest steps in the camera department. Now, while my real-world camera test was done early on without the more recent updates, I did already have a lot of good things to say about this new camera set. The main and ultra-wide sensors are the highlights, which make it the kind of shooter I personally look for, especially for video performance. An impressive extra tidbit is that the ultra-wide is a freeform lens, meaning the distortion correction is done on the sensor level, leading to very wide photos that don't have any of that warping on the sides. OnePlus did make sure to add in a zoom lens, which does fine and is useful in a pinch, and then there's the monochrome lens that rounds out the whole package. Monochrome photos are rather niche, but it is nice that the camera can do them natively, so if you do want to get moody with the black and white, you can certainly do so. My only real disappointment from an operational standpoint is the front-facing camera, which does not shoot more than 1080p at 30 frames. This is a feature that should be improving at the same rate as the rest of the cameras, but plenty of phone manufacturers have been showing us they don't feel the same way. So you get 2 good sensors and 2 supporting shooters, which put this phone in the right company, but then there's all the Hasselblad stuff. Aside from a cool new shutter sound, the enhancements in the 9 and the 9 Pro are basically all on the software level. Hasselblad brings their color tuning to the processing, resulting in photos and videos that I do find pleasing personally, but I can see where pixel peeping and comparing can complicate things. Photos are more pleasing from a stylistic standpoint than ever before on a OnePlus device, but the results, more than anything, simply make me more interested in what will happen in the future, when the Hasselblad work ends up including adjustments to the actual hardware. Ultimately, the OnePlus 9 Pro barely makes the proper strides to match its current competitors, but it's still a camera package that I can say is more than good enough for most people. One of my main highlights, the wide-angle camera, is actually offered to the base model OnePlus 9, which I think is great. Despite losing the zoom lens and some of the higher features like OIS, keeping the wide angle is a proper practical move, and it helps that it's such a good performer. Speaking personally, you know that I'm all about the wide-angle camera for that dramatic look in pictures and for vlogging video. So through the lenses of this OnePlus 9, let me go ahead and talk about the sponsor of this video, Best Buy. I actually took the phone to a local location where you can find the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro for yourself. But funny little tidbit, as it turns out, Best Buy has been moving those units so quickly the moment they get them that there weren't any to display on their actual shelves. When the phones are actually there at Best Buy, you can try them out in the store and get help from any of the specialists if you need it, and then you can check out the myriad of accessories that they would have on display. If you're going to get the new OnePlus devices on any carrier, activation and setup are all done for you, making the process super easy. But of course, you can head over to bestbuy.com to find all of those products that you want, including these phones, before you head to a local store for things like in-person or curbside pickup. With OnePlus now at Best Buy, it's even easier to get the best that the company has to offer. So thanks again to Best Buy for sponsoring this portion of the video, and now let's get back to some thoughts on the actual phones. Oxygen OS. Saying the name of this version of Android alone is often enough to convince OnePlus fans of why they stick with these phones. For years, we've been saying that this is one of the cleanest ways of experiencing Android, and some have gone as far to say that this is the way stock Android should be. Personally, I think that sentiment has somewhat shifted, with Oxygen gradually adding in more and more features that push the boundaries of that term minimalist. But what I applaud OnePlus for doing is keeping the spirit and the style of the simplicity mostly intact. On the surface level, you're looking at a pretty streamlined home screen with Google Discover over on the side, but OnePlus's own edition of The Shelf is still easily accessible with a swipe down from the middle. As I mentioned before, Oxygen OS is easy on the eyes in more ways than one, with the reading modes that include sepia tones and monochromatic rendering. And then of course there's the more recently added always-on display, which fills a gap that OnePlus phones were missing for quite some time. And you can actually go one layer deeper, as you can see here, with a special lock screen wallpaper called Canvas, where the software makes an art rendering of a portrait that you pick. My pick is pretty expected. As the software that brings all this powerful hardware to life, Oxygen OS remains one of the most appealing parts of a OnePlus device. Is it starting to get a little feature saturated? Well, yeah, but you have to go searching for all of the extras, and that keeps the general experience properly breezy. But let's turn the phone around again and talk about something that didn't work. I touched upon this a little bit in the camera portion, and while I do think that Hasselblad had a net positive effect on both the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro, it obviously didn't work to our collective expectations. It's important to remember that Hasselblad will have much more of an impact in future devices, but for right now, it's not much more than a shutter sound, a Pro mode that isn't drastically different from other Pro modes, and a bit more colorful style in the final rendered results. Again, I still think this is all a net positive, but I almost give more credit to the actual sensors being used, especially that ultra-wide, than I do the software processing. I think all parts of the shooting experience need to have that real touch of collaboration to justify the hype that we already knew OnePlus was going to put so much energy behind creating. Now this next one is not a huge negative, it's just a touch of comparison between the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro. Let me start by saying that both phones are pretty good lookers, but they aren't particularly exceptional in the design department. OnePlus does a really good job of supporting their own phones with first-party accessories, so this might not be a huge deal to most of you. But one aspect of product releases always intrigues me. I like exploring how companies price their premium features, and in the case of the OnePlus 9, you can literally list off what got cut. There's no zoom lens, none of the cameras feature OIS, the fast charging drops down to 15 watts, and even then it's only available in some regions. The screen resolution is lowered, and the build quality is significantly different because the frame is made of plastic. It's up to you to decide how much of these features take away from what is clearly a great core experience. I do think that the OnePlus 9 is still a great way to enter into the high-end levels of OnePlus's devices, but like most other companies, OnePlus had to make the same types of concessions to make their base model phone a reality. And it's always that value proposition that provides the X factor. Loyal OnePlus fans will always remember the days when this level of performance and build quality was somehow more affordable than many of its peers. As OnePlus has worked to become on level with the flagships that they used to kill, many of these fans have remained loyal and continue to support their products. The problem is, the OnePlus 9 and the 9 Pro are the culmination of the company's efforts to the point that it feels like a stopgap year. Viable as the flagship might be, it's almost like it's treading water before the next leg of the journey. We can only hope that moving forward there will be those dramatic upgrades that genuinely add to the company's sustained notoriety. Because as the company has increasingly found itself sitting side by side its highest competitors, quite literally now in carrier stores and in places like Best Buy, it needed to up its game in major areas like in the camera. Has it done that? Well, that's kind of debatable, as I outlined when talking about the Hasselblad hype. But the OnePlus 9 Pro in particular is still undeniable as a proper flagship phone that is worth your consideration, while the base model OnePlus 9 is still a good option for those who aren't as concerned about being on the bleeding edge of OnePlus's offerings. OnePlus's take on what makes a powerful smartphone reliable is still really effective, and it keeps plenty of its users coming back to it. Users like my father actually agree, as he got his updated OnePlus 9 Pro after being on OnePlus devices ever since like the 6. But for now, contentious as it might be, OnePlus still has a winner on its hands for anyone that wants to be a little bit different from the rest of the pack without sacrificing what makes a top-tier device a top-tier device. For more on the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro, you can subscribe to my channel for further content on this and beyond. Make sure you check out these phones over at Best Buy using the links in the description down below. From there though, drop some likes on this video and let me know what you think. What has your experience been like with the new OnePlus devices? And from there, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please take care of yourselves and each other and enjoy your tea, everybody.